Okay, thank you for the introduction, Nina. I'm excited about this to be able to look at breast health in a holistic way from different points of view. We're going to specifically, from the three of us points of view, look at it from nutritional, experiential, and then physical, and then emotional and mental on my side. So I just love groups, and I think that groups on Zoom are a really fabulous opportunity. And there are so many ways that we can connect and really sink into not only the presentation, but our experience here together if we all can contribute and we all feel like we're a part of this. So whenever I lead groups, we always have what I'm learning in my psychology degree now that we call this rounds. So I want to do a round of just a general check-in. Everybody's going to get to go and just say, you can say one sentence, you can say one word, you can grunt, you can say whatever you want to say, but I'm just really curious to hear something about how breast cancer, how breast health has impacted you in either a direct way or an indirect way, and what had you interested in stepping in on this presentation today? Because that really gets us a really good sense of where we're going to go and what direction we're going to take with this presentation. So if we're going to go all around and including the presenters as well. So for me, I'll start. I am interested in breast health because Haylie is a really good friend of mine, and I've been with her throughout this journey when she found out, when she started getting her treatments, and watching her and her husband go through this has been really eye-opening for me to watch somebody firsthand go through it. And so whatever I can do to help support her, help support anyone else who's going through something similar is really interesting and important to me. And also, I really love the psychosocial psychology aspect of emotional health and how that interplays with breast cancer or chronic illness in general, and the dynamic that happens with the mind-body connection. So that's going to be my portion of what I bring to tonight. That's my reason for being here. Joy, would you mind going next for us, taking yourself off mute and sharing with us a bit?
Sure, but mine isn't. So I mean, that was pretty serious, Becky. Mine is a little more, I think, maybe lighthearted. I mean, since I had kids and finished breastfeeding, I throw them into the sling every morning, and I've got two gals, and I don't really think that much about them anymore, you know. But I'm middle aged, and you know, it's reality. And Haylie is a good friend, and you know, I think she's had us all on the journey with her in a lot of ways. And you know, while you're watching a friend going through that, you're also thinking about your own situation. So I thought this would be an interesting time to have that chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Joy. Yeah, bringing some levity to this is perfectly fine. I'm going to tell you the backstory of the name of the talk in a little bit here. So that, and there is definitely levity to that.
Yeah,
perfect. Thanks, Joy. Brenda, what brings you out tonight?
Oh, for sure. For me, it's that discussion about cancer that is so much a part of so many families. I lost my grandmother to cancer, and you know, I've had one of my best friends die of cancer. So, I mean, cancer is everywhere, and you know, it's kind of just, you know, the short straw, it seems like. But you know, so the more I think that we can prepare ourselves for, you know, a situation, the better, and the more you can understand the emotional side, the better, I think, and how people cope and all that sort of thing. So that's what I want to hear about. And you know, I love the candidness generally of you guys' events. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. Awesome. Kara, did you want to hop on, take yourself off mute?
Kara might be putting her kids to bed. She did message in the chat that she was getting her kids to bed. But think she's away.
Okay.
I can go if you don't mind.
Yep, you sure go. You should. Yeah.
Awesome. So breast health is important to me, again, as a woman, and I work with women, I'd say 90% of the time in my business, and women's health issues are really underrepresented, under advocated for, and with Haylie's personal, like knowing Haylie and watching her go through the journey so strong, this has really brought it even closer to home. And so educating ourselves on the reality of a cancer journey and how we can support, you know, those around us and help each other out is really important to me. And then also sharing, you know, how to take some of that control through our daily habits and lifestyle is also something I'm excited to share about. So I'm really excited to get into the topic tonight.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nina. And for Kara, when you want to jump on, if you want to jump on and write it in the chat group, or if any of you have any questions or you want to jump in with questions or comments, feel free to do so. And last but not least, Haylie, what brings you out tonight?
Well, you do, Becky, actually. We were chatting when you and I were visiting this summer about how it'd be really great to do a presentation on breast cancer, breast health awareness through Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the more that I've been thinking about it, particularly with the platform that I've created, is that I think that awareness is great, but I prefer to have action. So hopefully striving to get people into action and actively participating in their breast health and being aware through action on how to effectively monitor the best way possible, because we now know that sometimes no matter how closely you monitor, you don't catch it anyways. So that's that. And then, yeah, bring some of that personal experience, I guess, into a discussion. And I think that a lot of times when there's a personal story attached to it, it can hit home a little bit more for people, that it's something that happens to people who are young as well as old. So yeah.
So good. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important for the monitoring, the prevention, but also the experiential. So sometimes it can't be helped. It happens, it surprises us, it comes out of nowhere. And that having someone like you who is a survivor, has worked their way through it and come out on the other side, can bring hope to all of us. And yeah, just that little extra bit of strength, I think, is really important. So the story, like Haylie was mentioning, we were talking about this summer, and just picture this. We're on a lake in southern Saskatchewan, and we're on my parents' homemade houseboat, which has 2 levels to it. So we're sitting on the roof, laying down on the roof, sunbathing. And Haylie's laying on her stomach, and another friend and I are sitting there, and we're just like chatting, having a nice summer day. It's great, beautiful day. And all of a sudden my dad lets the houseboat go crossways to the waves. So we start really rocking, like really going back and forth. And I look at Haylie, and dead in the eye, and I'm like, hold on to your tits. And she turns her head and gives me like a death stare. Because Haylie doesn't have any tits anymore. She gives me a death stare, and then we both burst out laughing, and we were like crying. We were laughing so hard. It was so funny. So to be able to bring some humor into this, some, you know, the elephant in the room, we're able to acknowledge it, I think, is really important. And that was the inspiration of today's talk. Hold on to your tits. Whatever those may be.
Literally or figuratively.
Literally or figuratively, exactly. So good. So I appreciate Haylie's amazing sense of humor throughout this whole thing. And we can get started.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with my stuff. And we go. All right. So this slide is useless. But about me. I'm Haylie, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer in, well, December 23rd, 2019 officially. A little bit about me in regards to everything outside of that is I do have 2 kids. Emily is 6 and Drayton is 3. At the time of diagnosis, Emily was 5 and Drayton was 2. I have my own physiotherapy clinic in Warman, Warman Physiotherapy and Wellness. My husband, Rob, has been with me, well, we've been married, gosh, 8 years this last summer, and together for 13. And I have wonderful parents that have been super supportive, as well as my sister, her husband, my brother, his wife, and then Rob's family as well in Saskatoon and Prince Albert. So we have a large network of individuals that has been able to support us through all of this. And we actually have quite a bit of experience with cancer pre my diagnosis. My dad has leukemia and has had leukemia since 2007. No, 2002. Yeah, something like that. And he had a stem cell transplant. We've been to the cancer center lots for him. And breast cancer actually runs in my family. So my grandma had breast cancer, and she, with her initial diagnosis, went through all of her treatment and everything. And then she had an episode of significant neck pain and problems about 7 years later. And by the time anybody clued in that it was a metastases, she had broken bones in her neck and required a halo in order to be stable. And then it was, time after that. So she was metastatic afterwards. And then I also had a cousin who ended up with breast cancer. She wasn't diagnosed until she was in her third trimester of pregnancy, and she had such high calcium levels in her blood from the metastases that she was delirious and had to deliver. And then she actually didn't make it much after delivery of baby. So that was my cousin Nicole. So breast cancer has been in my family for an extended period of time, and I've known about it for an extended period of time. My breast health itself has never been something that I've hugely focused on. Boobs weren't a big part of my identity by any means. My hair has never been a big part of my identity, which is, fine. It's good for me. I've never had large breasts or anything like that. And I never really paid much attention to them. I could wear a bra, I could not. It wasn't really that big of a deal. Nobody really noticed. And I, even with knowing grandma's history and everything, I didn't do my breast checks for a long time. And it was about 2 years ago, and I said, I've got to start really getting serious with this and actually start doing the proper checks and everything. So I looked up how to do it, and like you're in the shower, you've got your arm up, you're doing all this stuff through the armpit, and you're going around in circles and in and out and all of that kind of fun stuff. And that's great. Self-identification is fantastic. But if we come back to my self-diagnosis, so I identified the lump myself on November 19th last year. But through the summer, and it's interesting because of course with Facebook and your memories coming up and everything, I'm like, oh, did I have cancer then? And I won't ever know, right? But I had this feeling last year that I really needed to be paying attention. It was just this niggling intuition back of the head, like you really need to be paying attention to what's going on. And a lot of times when you're seeing the posters in regards to what are you paying attention to, right? There's a lot of physical changes that we expect to see with breast cancer. So a visible lump, right? Skin changes. So the skin changes that we're looking for would be skin color changes or texture. So a lot of times people are looking for an orange peely kind of texture. nipple discharge, bloody or otherwise, swelling, so if one breast is quite a bit larger than the other. Breast pain is sometimes listed. It's often listed as if it hurts, it probably isn't breast cancer, which I find interesting because discomfort in my chest was pretty well the only sign that I had. Insomnia, fatigue, and then of course weight loss is often touted as one of those things that happens with cancer, but it doesn't happen to everybody. And in fact, I gained weight with cancer. And for me, I like to kind of refer to that as, well, if I'm gonna have cancer, I might as well lose weight, even though I know that that's bad, right? But come on. Anyways, so when we're thinking about my whole story, I just had this sensation, this thought, this in the back of my head that I needed to be paying attention to what was going on. And I was at the clinic teaching a class. I was doing my exercise class for mums and babies and expecting mums. And I was holding on to one of the babies and they dropped a toy kind of on my chest. Of course, this is pre-COVID when I could actually hold babies that weren't mine or, you know, somebody that I knew. And I went to go grab the toy and something didn't feel quite right. And I gave the toy to the baby and I took a feel and I was like, yeah, that's a lump. And baby was happy and I put them down and then I poked around some more. I was like, maybe it's a rib head. That's fine. It's a rib head, I'm sure. But then the other side didn't feel the same. And so as soon as the class was over, that was about 20 minutes later, I called my family doctor and I went over there to have them take a look. And this is where I think the crux of it is if you have a lump, make sure that your provider actually touches it when you are in the office, okay? Because a lot of times, and I was still nursing at the time, so a lot of times if people are still breastfeeding, if they have a lump, it's normal, it's expected with breastfeeding, that kind of thing. We really need to pay attention to, no, I want this monitored and please, like, let's actually take a feel and see what's going on. So for me, I had a hard immovable mass and it was really close to my sternum. So right the center of my chest, it was very, very close to my sternum. And it wasn't going anywhere. And of course I was referred for an ultrasound, which I got into 10 days later, and then referred to the Breast Health Center from there. So from November 19th to December 23rd, when I got my official diagnosis, was a really interesting period of time for us, through the holiday season, of course, as well. The hard immovable masses, those are the ones that are stuck. They don't wiggle around all that much. You can't really get them to move. Also, if they have irregular edges, so they don't feel like a round ball, those are the ones that you want to get looked at like right away. I really like the Know Your Lemons campaign. The Know Your Lemons campaign has an egg carton with lemons in it with the different kind of visuals of what to be looking for as far as what the breast looks like potentially with different kinds of cancer. So there's the lumps and things like that. But again, mine was an invisible lump. You couldn't see it, right? And I only felt it, and it felt like a bone, right? So lots of people, I'm sure, would just assume that it was a bone. And this is where knowing what your body feels like ahead of time can make a really big difference for those who maybe don't have the same kind of palpation skills that I do as a physiotherapist, right? So do check in the shower. And quite frankly, a lot of times, like, you see lots of rules in regards to breast checking, like the same time of the month all the time and all of this. Like, if you remember, check. Who cares what day it is? Okay, just check. That's all I want, just check. And if you're more tired than usual, you know, like, even if we're parents and we've got all of these things going on, have that checked out too. Fatigue is not something that we should be really really noticing. So I was in a really bad, like, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I'm just burned out and I'll get back to it like per usual, but it just never came. So that's something to really pay attention to in regards to breast health, I think, or women's health in general. Treatment for me. So I was trying to count how many different kinds of breast cancer that there is, and I've come to 12. Okay, so depending on a variety of different factors will determine what treatment looks like for each individual person. So treatment for me is going to look different than it does for treatment for somebody else. And that's totally fine because there are lots of different variables that are considered. For me, because my tumor was stuck to my chest wall, I couldn't have surgery right away because they wouldn't be able to guarantee clear margins. So we did chemo first. So you can see in my top picture there, I'm getting this red liquid. That's my chemo. They call it Red Devil, AC. I dislike that term because I feel like words are very powerful things. And I prefer to call it Red Warrior because it's fighting for me and not against me, right? Thumbs up from Becky. So this is the Dox and Cyclo that I was getting initially. I had terrible side effects from that myself. Some people don't have any side effects at all. Everybody's super different. But whenever we're going through chemo, there are lots of things that we can do to support ourselves through that. And that's including telling the care providers if you're having problems. So we changed my medications, my supportive medications every week. And I also played with some other tips that I had got when I was pregnant and nauseated during pregnancy. I was able to talk to the oncologist about the Hall's vitamin C drops. Having something in my mouth to suck on really helped with the nausea, but I couldn't just have food in my mouth all the time because that's not good either. The only things that I felt like eating, and I'm curious if Nina will be able to shed any light on that, but the only things I felt like eating was citrus fruit, pickled veggies, and cashews. That was basically all I ate through that first 8 weeks. And I had like a little snack container, you know, like the kids' lunch containers, and I would just put like pickled vegetables here and some citrus fruit there and some cashews in the other spot, and that just came around the house with me. And going from there. So of course, with breast cancer treatment, anybody who is going for chemo, the type of chemo that we get has us losing our hair and things like that. There's a whole bunch of physical effects as well. We're going to dive into that a little bit, but the treatment for me, because again, the tumor was right against the chest wall, I needed the chemo to try and shrink the tumor so that I could have surgery to get clear margins. That's the goal. And then, so it was chemo, surgery, and then in theory, I was going to be getting radiation. And with the radiation was dependent on if I got clear margins or not, and if my lymph nodes ended up being positive. So when I was diagnosed on December 23rd, we were going in anticipating that I'd be staged 3B because they weren't able to see if my tumor was infiltrating my chest wall or not. And I was under the impression that my lymph node that we had biopsied was positive, but my lymph node had been negative and the tumor was abutting the chest wall and not infiltrating the chest wall. So I was downgraded to 2A. And I think that's the only time that I've ever been excited for a downgrade ever in my entire life. And I'm super, super happy about that. So I did go forward with a double mastectomy. My care team didn't fight me much on that. I see sometimes that people get some pushback as to if that will work for them or not with care providers in some of the forums that I'm in, but that was never a problem with me and my care team. They asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to chop them both off. If they're gonna try and kill me, I'm getting rid of them. So that's what we did. June 23rd, officially, they got clear margins and I was cancer-free. So that was super exciting. And because of the clear margins and my lymph nodes remaining negative, I didn't need radiation, which was super exciting. Not having to worry about that. And then because my breast cancer was estrogen positive, so I had been put into menopause. Who doesn't love menopause at 33? So I've been put into menopause, and actually yesterday just had my oophorectomy. So my oophorectomy to take out my ovaries and my tubes to make it so that I don't have to take a Zoladex injection every month. So that's kind of what treatment looks like for me. during treatment with chemo, some people do go into menopause already, which did, of course, happen for me. And the changes that menopause impart on the body changes actually a lot for pelvic health in particular. So whenever I'm seeing as a pelvic health physiotherapist, when I'm seeing my clients who are perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, there are lots of things that we consider in regards to tissue and vaginal health as well. So some of the things that we tend to come across, vaginal dryness can be problematic, pain with intercourse can be problematic, and of course, just the tissue turgor, the tissue function, can lead to incontinence as well. So although anybody at any age can be incontinent, because I see that from kids all the way up into older adults, that was where people would focus for pelvic health previously. If you are postmenopausal, menopausal, sometimes we will have an increase in leaking. So that can happen with us as cancer patients or going through treatment or as survivors because of the change in that hormone balance and how it impacts our tissue. So physical changes through treatment. I like to bring my kids into treatment and make the changes as fun as possible. So they actually cut my hair for me. My son had Play-Doh scissors and he was going nuts. It was really fun. And then when we shaved my head, we shaved it all together as well. And so then we're taking some control over those physical changes, which was really great. And when you lose your hair for chemo, for cancer treatment, it's not just the hair on the head that you're losing, like you lose all of your hair. However, for me, the first hair that came back was my armpit and leg hair. Like, why? Why? And then I had this really, because I wasn't paying attention to it. So by the time I noticed it, it was like really long. It's like, oh, why? Anyways, so I haven't ever really been all that worried about that stuff, even pre-cancer. So it doesn't really bother me. But if you're going to get one of them back first, could it not be the hair on my head? I don't know. So I have this lovely picture that my friend Bree Coop, she is Driftwood and Company photography, birth photography. She actually gifted me some pictures when I was first getting started. So she came and took pictures when we were first going to the cancer center. So I got this lovely Christmas tree cancer center photo from her. So the support that I have had as well has been really phenomenal. I know that a lot of people don't get the same kind of support that I do. My husband has been absolutely phenomenal. My family has been wonderful. And of course, coming into cancer, I was like, okay, there's lessons I need to learn, like how to delegate and like accept help. And like, if I can't learn these lessons on my own, I guess I'll get cancer and learn them then. And then it's like, oh, but then COVID, so you don't actually get any help. So I still have yet to figure out what exactly COVID is supposed to teach me, but like maybe it's just a really big lesson in the fact that I don't have any control. From a physiotherapy perspective, I'm really fortunate. Through my double mastectomy, I have had full range of motion. My mid-back is definitely a little bit stiff from my surgery yesterday. Those tables are not the most comfortable tables to lay on. But I think that physio serves a really important role. And I think that as people that are going through cancer treatments and the post-cancer treatment, when we're actually in that survivor or thriver period of time, it seems kind of silly sometimes to complain about some of these symptoms that you might be having, but the pelvic health complaints, pain with intercourse, urinary or fecal incontinence, these are all things that can and should be addressed. And especially if it's directly related to treatment. Like if you've been put into menopause and now you're having leaking, urine leakage or otherwise, that's probably something that can be addressed from a pelvic health perspective. It's something that I quite enjoy doing. I, of course, at this point, I'm not seeing people in person, but I do have staff at my clinic that can see individuals for pelvic health and pelvic health issues. And we're really fortunate in Saskatoon that we actually have a breast cancer specific physiotherapist, Maribel, at the Saskatoon City Hospital. So she does lots of work for people that are post-reconstruction, post-mastectomy for the cording and things like that that can happen in through there. And then of course, I've seen lots of clients myself for the mid-back tightness that I'm experiencing currently, as well as a variety of other different issues that can kind of come up from a pelvic health perspective as well. So that's kind of it for me, my story in a nutshell. I want to make sure that everybody else has some time to chat too. I have 2 different pages that I wanted to highlight: the HaylieLashta.ca website, as well as Haylie Lashta on Facebook and Instagram. I'm posting lots of stuff there. I'm currently my daughter's grade 1 teaching mentor at home. So right now there's lots of teaching mentor stuff on there, in addition to some of the cancer things and advocacy points that I want to keep touch on. And then of course I have Warman Physio, so it's warmanphysio.com for the website, and at Warman Physio on Facebook and Instagram as well. So that's me, that's all of that kind of stuff. If anybody has questions, they can toss them in the chat. I am going to let Nina get started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Haylie. I love your perspective and the strength that you showed during your journey, and it's inspiring to all of us, and a good reminder to really stay on top of your health, and and also advocate for yourself through your journey and beyond. So I'm Nina. I am a nutritional therapist, and I operate Nina Lane Wellness. And I'm really passionate about women's health, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a bit. But tonight I want to discuss the nutritional and essentially daily lifestyle component that we can bring into our overall health, and in particular, our breast health. So, like I said, I'm Nina. And really, this is my family. I have 3 kids, Connor, Thea, and Haylie, and then my husband, Jason. And we just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary this past week. So kind of a fun, exciting week that we had. And really, things that are important to me is my personal health and my family's health. That's what got me into what I do, and my mission, and of course, the people I love are part of that. So my mission is to really support and empower women to take charge of their wellness, to reconnect with their bodies, to create lasting and optimal health. And as I got into my journey, I wasn't particularly focused on women in particular, just in general health. But the more and more the clients that I see, the longer I'm in my industry, it becomes very clear that women often are struggling with their health. They are juggling many different areas of their life, and sometimes their wellness gets put to the side. So there's many women's health issues that I see in my practice and that I work to support, and breast cancer is one of them. Interestingly, breast cancer is actually the most common cancer in women worldwide. And there are many factors that can put us at risk for developing any cancer, and in particular breast cancer. But what I like to focus on is what are the modifiable risk factors that we can take charge of that can reduce the incidence of breast cancer in the long term. While it might not be a perfect strategy, we can do our best to take care of ourselves and reduce our risk for breast cancer and other types of cancer as well. Sorry, little friend joining me here. And so, as I mentioned, women's wellness is a really important part of what I do and part of my mission. And it's very common for women to be unsatisfied with their overall wellness. Even Michelle Obama brought highlight to women's health. You know, we are, even though our society is very forward thinking, we are the, managers. Many of us are the, sorry. One of my cuties. Women are often, managing their households, running from appointments and errands, and, multitasking. And we often get left to last, or we put ourselves last. but we have to put ourselves high on our to-do list. And sometimes it takes, something, a health crisis to do that. I see women in all areas of health and wellness. But the good thing is that we can support ourselves at any point in our wellness journey. And that wellness journey is important on many aspects. It is multifaceted and is not one-dimensional. As we're talking about tonight, there's that mental health component, emotional, so our relationships, our support and our connection, and our physical health. And I spend most of my time dealing with the physical components of wellness, and in particular, nutrition, diet, and lifestyle. And why is that? Because nutrition impacts all aspects of our health. It is our fuel, and it impacts our energy, it impacts our hormone balance, our brain health, and our cardiovascular health. And really, evidence is there that healthy diet and nutrition support breast health and recovery from breast cancer. I have some links here. If you'd like them, I can post them in the chat or send them later. But there is some really strong evidence that lifestyle and diet support not only the reduced risk for breast cancer, but also recovery from breast cancer. Now, there is no magic bullet. We have many factors. Some are not modifiable, but we can do what we can with where we are. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the foods that support breast health. And again, these are evidence-based, and they really do make up part of a healthy diet on many aspects. And so I'll point out a little fact about each area. So recommended to consume healthy fats. So fat is our friend, it's great fuel, and in particular our omega-3s, you may hear of fish oil, really are powerful, and they can help to reduce inflammation, and we should focus on those fats coming from whole food sources like fatty fish and less refined oils. And they also provide antioxidants that help to fight free radicals and damage in our tissue. We also want to include quality protein in our diet as a way to support our whole health, but also our breast health. In particular, when we are just generally supporting health, protein is necessary for building and repairing tissue. Now, as Haylie knows, chemo can be very tough on the body, and it not only goes after cancer, but healthy tissue. So including quality and adequate protein in your diet during cancer treatment can also be a helpful way to help your body repair your tissues. And you can get those from things like those fatty fish that also provide omega-3s, as well as unprocessed meats and quality vegetarian sources of protein. Now, quality carbohydrates is a big one. And I was like, hey, how do I break this down? But it's interesting that Haylie mentioned citrus fruits as being one of the things she was craving. So fruits and vegetables are really our best sources of quality carbohydrates. And citrus fruits is one of the foods that is noted at being helpful in reducing risk for breast cancer. And that's because, like many other fruits, it is loaded with vitamins as well as plant compounds called phytochemicals that actually fight damage within our tissue, provide antioxidants, which our body needs to heal as well. So citrus fruits, berries, apples, and pears in particular are all linked with reduced cancer as well as healing the tissue. And a lot of that has to do with those wonderful plant compounds that they are rich in. In general, fruits and vegetables are full of antioxidants, anti-cancer, as well as anti-inflammatory effects. We can all benefit from more fruits and veggies in our diet. Along with those fruits and veggies being full of antioxidants, they're also full of fiber. So fiber from whole grain sources, legumes, and those fruits and vegetables are actually super important for our general health, but interestingly, our breast health. So as Haylie said, sometimes hormones can be involved in the development of cancer. And in particular, estrogen is one of those ones. And so fiber is really important for helping eliminate waste, which includes the metabolized estrogen hormone. So regularity of our bowels is important for our hormone health, and fiber is a big part of that. So they're also important to balance our microbiome. So our microbiome is made up of all those friendly critters, organisms, bacteria and yeast that live on us and in us. And they're important for helping to fight disease, including cancer. So the fiber actually feeds those healthy bacteria and helps to reduce cancer risk. Now, interestingly, I had to make, so quality carbohydrates include leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables, but they get their own note because really when it comes to nutrition, they are powerhouses. So leafy greens, those would be things like spinach, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, there's tons. They are particularly rich in antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, and in one notable B vitamin, folate. So folate levels actually may protect, high folate levels may protect us against breast cancer. So especially when you're heading into menopause, whether that's natural or therapy induced, high folate is a big part of the detoxification process, as well as calcium and magnesium are rich within the leafy greens. And so supporting healthy bone health, pardon me, is an important role that those leafy greens play. Now I mentioned estrogen, and cruciferous vegetables also play a role in managing estrogen within our body. So cruciferous vegetables have a component that is the precursor to something called indole and diindole methane, also noted as much simpler DIM. And so DIM actually helps to increase our sex hormone clearance in the liver, as well as to halt DNA damage. And as little as 1 cup of cruciferous vegetables a day has been shown to be helpful. So that's like cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, again, kale, and many others like collard greens, I think. Oh, let's go back one. I'm covering up that portion of my slide with the speaker. Okay, and then lastly, probiotics. So probiotics can, we might think of pill form, and I do have that there, but we can actually have dietary sources of probiotics in fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, miso, sauerkraut, just to name a few. Probiotics, they're good sources of those friendly flora that actually help to make up a healthy biome, but they also contain many nutrients, including B vitamins, enzymes that help to protect against breast cancer. And the intake of probiotic-rich foods have been linked with a decrease of cancer risk. So that seems like a big list of foods that help us out. And really, a lot of them, are also what make up a generally healthy diet. So this is probably not a coincidence. So I talked a lot about vegetables, and that's because vegetables are amazing. And really, when we eat different colors, we get different antioxidants and components. And so we can see that there's very much a link between eating the rainbow and reducing disease and cancer risk. And so whether we're looking to prevent or reduce our risks for cancer, or to help our body recover and to support healthy hormones, we can choose a wide variety of colors for different health benefits. Just a little note here. Okay, so on the other hand, there is a list of foods that we can avoid to support breast health and to reduce our risk of breast cancer. Now, many of these foods are not nutritionally rich, but some of them are very enjoyable. So we don't always have to limit them 100%, but these foods have been linked with increased risks of cancer. So added sugars, so we're not talking about natural sugars, that we find in fruits, but added sugars that you might find in refined or processed foods. as well as refined and processed carbohydrates like white or refined grains, as well as alcohol. So alcohol itself, increased or moderate to high risk of or moderate to high consumption of alcohol is linked to increased risk of cancer, as well as processed meats. So animal protein in general is not an issue, but when we go to foods that are filled with nitrates, preservatives, and additives, they often can be linked with increased risk of cancer. And then lastly, fast and fried foods. So we're talking about those easy to grab on the side of the road, but also then deep fried foods that can also lead to inflammation and increased risk of cancer. So enjoy in moderation, because a lot of these foods are enjoyable and we can acknowledge that, but we still want to acknowledge that they do have risk associated with them. And to highlight that, we know that food is not just fuel. So I come a very physical side of nutrition and health, and the science says this, but then we have to acknowledge that human component, that food is about family, about community, about identity, and involves your relationships. So when we nourish all those things, we will eat well. So when we focus on our whole body, we will be well. And so as I say this advice, it's not, or this information, we know that healthy food is our best fuel, but there is a component of eating and fueling our bodies that is not just physical. And Becky's going to get into that more with her part of the presentation. So I love to help women, and breast health is definitely a women's health issue. And so I work to help women in my practice to have increased health in all areas. And sometimes that's support and direction, in any way that you need. But in particular, I work with women to support them through digestive issues. Digestive issues can also impact our hormonal health, as I mentioned. Our bowel regularity can be directly linked with our estrogen in our body, as well as metabolic dysfunction. Women who have diabetes, hypertension, obesity have increased risk for developing breast cancer. And then hormonal imbalances again. So healthy hormones are a part of healthy breasts. And whether that's through menstrual issues, fertility, or menopausal issues, nutrition can play a big part in that health. And then autoimmune disease. 78% of autoimmune disease sufferers are women. And often that's due to our hormones. There's not a clear cause effect, but there is a correlation between our hormones and autoimmune disease. So these are all women's health issues that can impact your life, but also can be impacted by our dietary and lifestyle choices. So thank you for listening. If you'd like to enter your email into the chat box, we will be doing some draws at the end of the presentation for a complimentary nutritional assessment. And if you have any questions for me as well, pop them in the chat box. I'd love to answer them. Thank you. Becky, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Nina, for explaining why my citrus fruit craving was such a thing.
You're welcome. It's so our bodies are intuitive, and sometimes we have those cravings for a reason, right?
Does anyone have any questions for Nina or Haylie at this point that they want to ask? You can save them to the end too. Try to think of some. Okay, so I'm Becky Palmer from Brilliance Health Coaching. I'm a health and relationship coach. I am also a pharmacist, and I'm a master's student in counseling psychology. So I'm really passionate about mental health, emotional health, and how relationships interplay with the mind-body connection. Again, starting out my journey in the more traditional medical field of pharmacy, of pharmaceuticals, of medicine, and then branching over into the military, which was very primary healthcare oriented, and very much when you're a military member, your life is your job basically, and your job is your life. And we have some of the best medical care for our military members. It's very primary care or holistic in the sense of it's a one-stop stop. So you go to one building for your pharmacy, for your doctor, for your physiotherapy, to see a dietitian, to see social work, to see your mental health. All of it is in one spot. So I got really early on access to how that affects people and families and their jobs and their work. And then we add in the component of PTSD and trauma, and that led me into this passion for counseling and mental health and getting to the root cause of what's going on in these chronic illnesses, mental health wise and physically wise. So I think it's interesting that Nina brought up all these physical components of the food, or this like physical foundation or structure, the building blocks of what we're made of. And then we can think of mental health as the kind of moving, the way the parts are moved around. So we've got all these building blocks that come through our food, and then our hormones and our neurotransmitters and the little components that these foods make in our body, they get moved around in certain ways. And that can either be functional or it can be dysfunctional. So I'm getting a lot of inspiration tonight from tonight's presentation from Dr. Gabor Mate. Has anybody heard of him here? If you haven't, I definitely recommend checking him out. There's a YouTube video that I linked here. And again, like Nina said, we can send you out some links later on or in the chat. But I definitely recommend checking him out, Googling him, reading his book. When the Body Says No is about everything that we're going to talk about in my part of the presentation tonight. It's all about that mind-body connection and all the studies that back that up, all of the evidence that backs it up. This is based in research, psychological research, medical research, nutritional research, all of it. And I know Haylie can tell you too that pelvic health has a very strong emotional component to it as well. Okay, so in particular, chronic illnesses like cancer, breast cancer, heart disease, autoimmune diseases that Nina mentioned, they often have some kind of theme emotionally that correlate with them. So correlation isn't cause. It doesn't mean like a linear, this causes this. It's more, these two things seem to really go together. And something that really goes together with breast cancer and chronic breast health issues, or really any kind of feminine issue, is giving too much. And that involves suppressing our emotions, suppressing our own needs in order to take care of another. And if you think of that as like, that's a natural maternalistic mother, the kind of the archetype of the mother thing to do is to overgive. And if you think of what our breasts represent, right, they're a source of nourishment for babies. And that's a way of literally giving those nutrients and those building blocks to another human being. And that's beautiful, that there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of life. But what can happen is that can tip out of balance and we start giving too much and we start repressing our own emotions. And this constant stress can damage our DNA prematurely. It can lead to autoimmune disorders. It can lead to cancer. And on the flip side, we're going to talk about this in a second too, it can lead to heart disease if you're overly expressing your emotions in some way. So taking care of others can be both stressful and fulfilling, but constant stress puts pressure and stress on the body. And we're all under constant stress. 2020 is such a magnifying glass of that. We are under constant stress. And our body, even when we don't think we're stressed, we're stressed. I once had a medical student come to my pharmacy and she had all of these symptoms. She had gut issues, she had a headache every day, she had all of this whole laundry list of symptoms. And then I said to her, I'm like, oh, like part of this must be because you're stressed. And she looks at me dead in the face and says, I'm not stressed. I was like, you're a medical resident. You are 100% stressed. Like, there's no way you're not. So we are that frog in the boiling pot of water, right? We don't even realize that we're getting stressed out. So in particular with breast cancer, this preoccupation with caring for others, caring for the needs of others, can lead to neglecting ourselves. And then this puts us at a risk for chronic illness. So asking for support and help, getting help in your relationships if you're struggling, that is all protective to your long-term health. So for example, and I observed this in Haylie, and I'm sure she will come back and clarify this too, that often breast cancer diagnoses early on, they're more concerned about everybody else around them through the diagnosis than they are themselves. It's like, how's my husband gonna respond to this? How are my kids gonna respond to this? How is everybody else gonna be with this diagnosis? So you're automatically already starting to think of everybody else first. And we'll get into why that is, okay? So in particular, we want to focus on anger here, because anger is a particularly intense emotion. And suppression and repression of anger, which is a God-given kind of natural emotion, leads to autoimmune diseases. It can lead to cancer. And like I kind of mentioned in the last slide, it can also, this overexpression of anger or uncontrolled expression of anger can also lead to heart disease or heart attacks, strokes. And the example there is if anybody has road rage, that kind of like out of control anger, we all experience it. I've had road rage. We've all had it to some degree. But if that is consistent in our lives, then that can lead to heart disease. But cancer is unique in that it's more about the suppression of anger. That's what studies are showing. Suppression starting in childhood. So healthy ways to deal with anger, just to start off here, is kind of a step approach. First, we have to notice that we feel angry. Second, we have to accept it as valid and as real. Then we have to do some exploration into the need that's coming up behind the anger. Usually the anger is going to be protective in some way. It's trying to get a need met. And then we need to express that need by voicing it to somebody who will listen and provide it to us. So having a good, strong support network around us that is willing to listen and then adapt to our needs is going to be super, super important and protective. This includes relationships and marriages. So studies have shown that unhappy marriages are often partnerships where our emotions can't be expressed. We don't feel like we can freely be in our authenticity and voice our emotions. They're either suppressed, they're denied, they're ignored, or they're invalidated. Happy marriages, on the other hand, are when we're able to express our emotions. And this includes anger. It doesn't have to be directed at the person, but you are able to express, I feel angry right now, without that being a major problem for the relationship, right? And so this is something that our culture isn't great at teaching us. So if you're having issues with this, if this is something that's like, oh, I'm ticking off every box here, then you're not alone. This is a pretty normal thing in our culture to not have a good relationship with anger itself. And there are lots of tools and lots of methods to work through that. So that's the good news. Lots of studies on anger that are really helpful. Hanging on to rules that society imposes on us. This whole mother archetype role that I was talking about, we can really heavily identify with that. A lot of our self-worth can come from that. Our identity can come from that. And so we may have to play with that role a little bit, maybe give up some of the things that we were doing in order to feel valuable, but are draining us. Maybe our husbands can do something more and we can let them do that. We could let them do it their own way. People pleasing is another way that we are suppressing ourselves. Self-neglect also is another way. So all of these three things, the roles, the people pleasing, the self-neglect, they can, over time, if they're not addressed, can cause a deterioration in our health. And this is actual studies that are showing this. So the mind and the body are connected, 100%. There's a connection to the mind and the body. It's pretty self-evident at this point. The individual is part of the environment. You can't take the individual out of the environment. We don't exist in vacuums. We are a part of the foods that we eat, of the relationships that we surround ourselves with, the friendships, the things that we absorb ourselves in. We're shaped by this. And this includes our inner minds, and our emotions are shaping our bodies moment by moment. Our social and relationship environment is shaping our internal world, our emotions as well. For example, studies show that children who have really high stress parents are more likely to get asthma. I think I spelled it right. So this is not to say, again, a correlation, right? We're not blaming the parents, like you're a high stress parent, therefore your child will get asthma. That's a cause and effect thing. This isn't a cause and effect thing, it's a correlation, right? Studies have shown that when kids are in a high stress environment, the likelihood that they have asthma is also higher. So just something to go like, interesting, right? And the way that I kind of can figure that out is that stress is a response mechanism, right? And it can get exhausted, and we call that adrenal fatigue. And so when we're under constant stress, when the foot is constantly on the gas pedal all day, there's no rest, eventually our adrenals burn out and the system becomes less responsive to stress. And it's interesting because the way that we treat asthma is through bronchodilators and steroids, right? So the bronchodilators dilate the airways in the lungs to help you breathe, and then the steroids reduce inflammation. So we're replenishing these stress hormones back into the body when the reason that those are depleted in the first place is because of high stress, right? So we're kind of like chasing our tail. So that's what really got me into functional medicine. So I was like, let's get to the root of what's going on here, right? If at the very least we can reduce symptoms, and they have shown that reducing stress does reduce the symptoms of asthma because it reduces inflammation over time chronically. So super interesting, hey? Talking relieves stress. Women, I think, inherently understand this. We're wired, the estrogen component in the way that we're wired in that way is kind of like, yeah, we do relieve stress by just like kind of rehashing our problems, ruminating a little bit on them out loud. That can be really helpful to relieve tension and stress. Men need to talk to. And I really find that in my coaching practice that I get men in front of me and they just are like, nobody's ever really listened to me before. I've never talked so much. And they just really need that space and that safety, especially having somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight to listen to them without any kind of, there's just that safety container. So talking definitely relieves stress. Major stressors, so this was an interesting statistic too that I saw. Major stressors in life plus social isolation, so not having good friendships or support networks, make women 9 times more likely to develop breast cancer. So that's how protective these support systems and friendships and good relationships, and that includes your relationship to yourself. So even if you maybe only have 1 or 2 good friends, or your husband is good, but you don't really have any girlfriends, or you've got a lot of girlfriends, but you don't have a partner, even your relationship to yourself matters. And that's something you are fully in control of. You can, through counseling, through therapy, through coaching, through different mechanisms, you are in control of. So that connection with others, to feel understood, to feel seen, to talk to others about how you feel, especially anger, working through these issues that we have through anger culturally and socially and independently. This allows for stress to reduce in the body which then allows that parasympathetic system to switch on, which is all about rest and relaxation and healing. So if you think of like there's the sympathetic system, that's your stress system, that's your fight or flight. If that foot is always on that gas pedal, the engine is going to wear down because it never has a chance to rest. It never has that time in the garage to just kind of sit and settle and rehabilitate itself. And then think of what happens when you're super stressed. You don't sleep, you don't eat properly, all of these behaviors that come out when we're stressed out. Those are even accumulative on our body not having that natural tendency to heal itself and rejuvenate, because it does. And that's basically what sleep is for, right? Is that our brain shrinks and toxins are released and we get to heal our bodies. So sleep is really, really important for mental health and for physical health. And this protects us long-term, having good support systems around us. So again, can't stress that enough. Okay, so back to this topic of cancer and self-denying behaviors. These are learned in childhood, and it comes through attachment theory. So we've got different types of attachment styles. We have some basic needs as children, right? We need to feel like our caregivers are going to take care of us. So there needs to be kind of that bonding, that attachment. We need to feel, as we start to grow up, we need to feel our own sense of authenticity and independence and individuation. We need to start feeling like we're our own little being, right? Like I have 2.5-year-old nieces, and it's like, no, me do it, no, me do it, no, me do it. Like they want to do it themselves, right? They want to figure things out for themselves. And so that's a basic human need, is for that independence. So first we need attachment, then we need independence. The third is we need those physical needs met in the Maslow's hierarchy. We need safety, we need shelter, we need food, we need access to those things consistently. So when those 3 categories of needs come into conflict, that's when we start to, it's like our brain gets programmed, our nervous system gets programmed to survive in a certain way, and we bring that up into adulthood. Okay, so we're programmed as children, and then those programs can adapt over time, but sometimes they don't. They get stuck in loops, and then we bring that up into adulthood. And this is one of the things that we can bring up into adulthood, is self-denial. And self-denial is a way that we protect ourselves and we adapt to our attachment to caregivers. And when our caregivers as infants are stressed out all the time, we learn that suppressing our needs actually helps us attach better to our caregivers. So when we're, basically needless and we can take care of ourselves, or we just pretend we don't need anything, then that reduces the stress of our caregiver slightly, and then they bond with us better. And so it's like we're overriding all our other needs in order to bond with our caregiver. And our systems are very much set up to do that because we're so dependent on our caregiver, right? Like they are the source of those physical needs. They are the source of everything else when we're that little. So it makes sense in a survival mechanism that we would do that. But when we bring that up into adulthood, then we come into dysfunction, right? So this becomes an unconscious memory that's stored in our nervous system, stored in our neurocircuits. And this is a form of trauma. But I am obsessed with trauma because I think trauma is a gift. And I think it's a way that we learn all these survival tactics and we learn all these mechanisms to adapt and get through life. And then once we become conscious of them, so notice it's unconscious memories, but once we become conscious of them, now they don't have to rule us anymore, but we still get to keep the gifts that came from them. So we still get to keep the fact that we are really good at anticipating other people's needs and that we're good nurturers and we're good mothers. We get to keep those skills, but now we can use them consciously instead of them overriding all of our other needs. Does that make sense? Everybody okay so far? This is heavy stuff, and I understand that. Not everybody gets so jazzed up about this as I do, but it's so important. It's so important for everybody to know. So this message that is received when we're little is that in order to be lovable, we have to suppress our own needs and our own sense of self. Okay, those other two needs get overridden. So it's all connected, right? The emotional centers in the brain or the limbic system, the hormonal system, the nervous system, the immune system, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So I know you've probably heard of fight or flight. You've maybe heard of freeze, right? But have you heard of fawn? No? Okay. So fight is obvious. You get aggressive. You're like, I'm going to punch you in the nose. You're under some kind of stress. I'm going to punch you. Flight is I'm going to get out of here. Freeze is like, oh, don't look at me. If you don't look at me, you won't eat me, right? And then fawn is actually a people pleasing. It's an adaptive mechanism that is that self-denial. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome in some ways too. It's like, I'm just going to completely abandon myself and make sure I anticipate all of your needs so that I stay safe. And this can really happen in homes where one person is really unpredictable emotionally. So they have to really tune into the caregiver's moods, and because it could shift at any moment. So you develop this kind of hyper focus on how other people feel, because it could mean, in the extreme cases, it could mean you could, get attacked at any minute, or you could get loved at any minute. So you really focus on what's going on. And that fawning, that kind of catering to somebody, is a protective mechanism. So again, all of these things like the fight, the flight, all of them have certain inherent skills that get developed through them, through the trauma response that develops. But we just want to become aware of it so that we can use it for our own benefit instead of it just pummeling us over. Okay, also the digestive system. So that's kind of where our intuition comes from, these gut feelings. It's really interesting how much we're learning about how, and I'm sure Nina could go on for days about this too, about how many neurotransmitters that are used in the brain are actually formed in the gut, and how the gut is its own brain in a big way, and the heart is its own brain. So it's not just this brain that we're talking about. We're talking about all these brains and this whole nervous system that's constantly in dialogue. And all of this is connected. The mind, the body, the spirit, the soul, all of it's connected. Okay, so your childhood feelings. These are impacting how chronic disease develops as an adult. And I went over these three great needs and how they can override each other. But basically, as a kid, you learn to respond to your environment. You learned how to respond to the emotions of the adults around you. You used your feelings and your intuition to figure this stuff out because you didn't have that cognitive development yet, right? So you were reading body language, you were reading emotions, you could regulate with the adults around you. There's that co-regulation that happens with heartbeats that sync up. All of this happens with children. And when our caregivers aren't very emotionally regulated, we're not blaming them. Again, it's no fault of theirs. We can trace back the lineage to, Adam and Eve. But for whatever reason, if they're not regulated, then they pass that on to the kids. So we learn how to suppress these feelings, suppress our needs. We're either blatantly told that what we need isn't appropriate, or we're just ignored, or we're gaslit, which just means we're kind of invalidated. And then we start to develop an over-reliance on intellect in our culture, on rationality, on dependence on authority. These develop in childhood. Okay, so it's interesting what's happening with authority too. Whereas healthy anger, when we want to express anger in a healthy way, which is super, super important, this is a communication, right? Emotions are all communications. And so knowing what anger means and what it's trying to tell us is super important. This is why I say get into relationship with your own anger, your own emotions. They are showing you when the integrity of that sense of self, of that authentic person that you are, when that is being violated in some way or perceived to be violated. Sometimes it's not as big of a deal as you think it is until you get more information, and sometimes it is a big deal. So that communication is important. So knowing your boundaries, knowing your range, knowing how to express your boundaries, because anger arises when these boundaries are crossed. Okay, so we want to uncover, again, we want to uncover the need behind the anger. We want to discover what it is that we're actually wanting to happen that didn't happen. So if you think, the example I use, we'll come back to that road rage example. Somebody cuts you off, right? And you get this surge of anger, like intense anger. I know what's happened to me. Surge of intense anger comes out. And if you have the ability to sit back and think about it, whether it's in that moment, probably not, but maybe a little later, you think back and you say, what is it that got violated there? Actually, physically, somebody swerved into your lane and came into your space, and that was dangerous, right? Like they could have actually made contact and hurt you or hurt themselves or other people. So there's a boundary being crossed there. So it actually is a correct response to get angry. We just want to be angry in a way that's proportional so that we can get the need met, right? So it's angry enough to be alert so that we can put our foot on the brake and maybe get out of the way, and then be able to calm ourselves down. But this all takes some emotional awareness and intelligence, right? So we want to uncover what the need is. The need is to not be hit by another car, and then respond to it in a way that has that need be met. That communication piece is really important, even if it's just communicating it to yourself. Even if you don't end up communicating it to anybody else, you're just like, yeah, it's right for me to not want to get hit by another car. Like, that's okay, that's legit, right? So don't want to have that boundary crossed. That's just a lot of paperwork and potentially a pain in the butt, literally. So developing healthy ways to care for others is going to be really important. This is protective long-term against chronic illnesses, and in particular, breast cancer. So again, that integrity, that boundary integrity, protecting that, keeping out what is unhealthy and letting in what nourishes us. So our breast health is something that nourishes others. We have to make sure any breastfeeding mom knows they have to drink enough water, they have to eat the proper foods, or they're not going to have the milk supply to feed their baby, right? So that applies to our emotional and mental lives, relational lives as well. We want to be letting in enough to nourish ourselves so that our cups are full that we can give. This is also, right, this boundary integrity system is also very much related to our immune system too, or driving, or like there's all these different metaphors that are the same thing, that your sense of self is really important. This also means the ability to say no. And saying no can be tough for people that want to just nourish the world and give to the world and give everything of themselves. Saying no can feel like life or death, right? You don't want to make somebody else angry. You don't want to make somebody else disappointed in you. You don't want to feel like you're not good enough or worthy or productive enough or enough, right? And so saying no can be difficult for people who are really conditioned and grew up having to self-sacrifice. So we have to work at that, right? We have to practice it and have different ways of trying it out and then seeing what happens. It can trigger fears about abandonment, and these attachment needs we can have fears around that. But we need to reteach our bodies that, yes, that may have happened in the past when we were children, but we're adults now. We can reparent ourselves. We can teach the people around us how to treat us. We can be good examples to our children, to our little girls. And caring for others means that we have to feel secure and safe and nourished ourselves. Okay? So I saw this on Instagram a few days ago. So just to wrap up, this is the last slide. I just thought this was a really good way of putting it. So if you look down the martyr column, it's all about self-sacrifice, right? The martyr sacrifices herself. And whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, it has all of these effects that we talked about, right? So wearing the pain or the giving as a badge of honor, right? I'm a mother, I give. I'm a woman, I give. I'm a business owner, I give. Like, that is great. But if you're wearing it as this like almost like badge of honor at the cost of myself, like there's this martyrdom that's happening. Again, rooted in trauma, not your fault. But once you start to be aware of it and aware of what needs are getting met through this martyrdom, now we can switch into survivor. And so survivor is seeking out healing, looking for help, sharing yourself, sharing your story, getting attention in a positive way, right? We all need attention. Well, every one of us needs attention and approval. We all need that. That's a human need, right? So when we look for it on purpose and we look for it with approval, then we can actually get that need met in an authentic way. And then we shift into this thriver who is healing. She's healed and continues to heal. Then she can help others from a place of full. Then she can nourish others from a place of she's so full that she can't help but give, right? She shares her story in service of others, like Haylie did tonight. She asks for help and attention when she needs it. So I just thought this was so cool because Haylie is so in the thriver category, and I admire that. And it's such a cool story of being at your lowest low and making that decision. I want to heal. I want to do this for my community, for my family, for my kids, for my husband. But mainly I want to do this for myself because this life is worth living and it's worth living well. So kudos to you, Haylie. You're beautiful. I'm so grateful for everybody who came tonight. And if there's any questions, this is your time for, you can ask me, you can ask Haylie, you can ask Nina. I'd love to hear, or feedback as well.
I love this slide, Becky. Stealing it from wherever it was that you saw it was perfect. And I think it was you and I who were talking, was it in February? With Kirsten, I believe, about I strongly think that my ability to shift and go straight into a this is just what needs to be done mode came directly from the specific work that I had been doing for myself from a mental health, like personal couples counseling perspective, things like that, pre-diagnosis. And from my perspective, like I have a hard time even trying to fathom what this would have looked like if we hadn't done all of that work ahead of time. And being part of some of the different forums that I'm in and seeing some of the various ways in which couples are interacting, it just is absolutely mind-boggling to me that that's the mentality that some people are taking, because we like it's such a huge shift in perspective, but that shift in perspective, if you're in a good place, is a very different shift in perspective than it would be if you're in a not so good place, I think. And I can't say enough for the hard work that we did ahead of time and how that has benefited tenfold throughout this whole year. 2020 has been a shit show. So yeah. That slide is awesome.
I liked that part that you said too. I didn't know that you had that little niggling intuition a year ago that was saying like, pay attention to this, like that. To me, that was your gut instinct of or it could be your higher mind. It could be your connection to whatever higher power, or it could be your gut, or it could be a combination of both, right? So that to me is so important, I think, for people, for women, to trust that.
To trust it. And that was one of the, like, so for me, that feeling came about, would it be in like spring last year? Like, I need to be paying attention to something. A lot of the clients that I had coming in were cancer survivors of some sort or another. And it was this, like, yeah, I need to be paying attention. I had 4 weddings to attend last summer, and all the dresses that I wanted to wear had something to do with boobs. I was like, cool. So like, we're going to do that, I guess. And that's never been like a style that I've never wanted, like a deep plunging something or other ever in my entire life. So I was just like, all right, well, I guess I got to go with it, because that's what I want. That's fine. Yeah. And, you know, ultimately, like, thinking, and again, of all of the staging and stuff like that. So there's a grade that you can get, a tumor grade, and it's scored out of 9. And the higher the score you get, the more aggressive the tumor is. And of course, me being an overachiever, I got a 9 out of 9. Which means that the cells are extremely differentiated, and it was just very aggressive. And so when I was talking to the oncologist, I said, so like, how long has this been sitting around? I mean, I know that you can't guarantee how long, but like, have I been missing this for months? She said, no, probably not. But, which is like relieving, I guess. But yeah, it was that, like, it started in the spring, and it just got more and more intense through the summer and into the fall. So I would say that if anybody's got something like that going on, like, a lot of times the health system tells us that we're being hypochondriacs, but like, you know your body best.
Yeah. And at the very least, you're monitoring it in yourself for the changes. You know your body better than anyone does.
So
thank you.
Okay,
well, Nina, are we okay to do our closing round? That's cool. Okay, so again, bear with me here. I like to wrap things up. Again, I'm learning in my official groups coaching class right now. Group counseling class right now, that it's very important that you wrap up a presentation or a session, which I was intuitively doing anyway, but now I know that it's actually a legit thing you're supposed to do. So just like we started, what's something, we're going to go around the room again. And Kara, if you are here, you're welcome to participate. If not, that's okay too. But what is something from this presentation that really hit home for you, that hit your heart, that you're going to take with you out into the world and either share with somebody else or keep it close to your heart? What is something that you really felt you resonated with during this presentation? And Joy again, my brave Joy, do you mind going first?
I have no problems going first. Thanks, Becky. I want to say thank you to the 3 of you. I really, you know, your perspectives, you know, the different perspectives was really kind of cool. And so I really appreciated that. You know, for me, listening to Haylie really connects for me. And I want to say a big thank you to you, Haylie, for your honesty and for sharing, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Joy. Brenda?
Well, for me, there was a couple things. I think when, Becky, you were talking about how people as children can take that fawn approach, and I think my oldest daughter is going through that. We both, my husband and I, can have quite strong emotions, and I think both daughters ended up being quite they were trying to calm us all the time. And so I think they took on that role to create that calm home life. when us as parents weren't giving it to them. So that's really a huge nugget that I appreciate. And then, and I'm going to try not to cry, but you and Haylie and Nina together are, like I said, world changing. You guys could take this message to the world and change the way we live and the way we treat our health and our bodies and our minds and how closely they are connected. Like I said, this is world changing stuff. And you have to get that message out to everybody in the world. So I wasn't going to cry, but thank you for this. And I'm so honored to participate. Thank you so much.
Love you so much, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda.
So glad you were here with us tonight. Nina, good luck following Brenda's speech.
I'm like,
Brenda's gonna make me cry.
you know, Brenda, though, you know, it's amazing. Like, I am so passionate about people advocating for their health in whatever way they need to. And you know, I did my part, you know, I do the physical part mostly with people and like encouraging them and, you know, realizing that your day-to-day impact has long lasting effects and that what you do does matter. And it matters, you know, on just, you know, being sure in yourself as Haylie represented, you know, and taking charge of your health and advocating for proper screening. And, you know, with Becky, that emotional component and understanding, you know, that it does have this huge connection and it's such an important part of our well-being. And in whatever area that we need it, that we need to step up and be advocates and be committed to growth, like just continue, like whatever it is, everyday progression and in all areas of our health. But, you know, for us women, you know, that breast component is such an important part. So.
Sure. And it's not about blame. It's not about blaming anybody. Everybody's doing the best that they can at the time. This is all hindsight stuff. We learn after the fact and then we do better, right? We gain, and that's what wisdom is. It's applied knowledge. And as a culture, as a group, as friends, as family, we're gaining this wisdom and this knowledge that, yeah, like, let's get the message out because it's super, super fucking important. I get to swear once. It's still rated PG.
I think technically you get 2, according to Disney Plus.
Okay. So you can take one, Haylie, if you want.
Ooh, good. I always like listening to Nina and Becky talk. So I steal things every time. Today in particular, based on what we were going through with my surgery and stuff yesterday, when we were on our way to surgery, Rob said, you know, I don't feel stress like from a psychological perspective, but it's just running rampant in my body. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah. So like when you were talking about that med student with all of these symptoms, right? And like, oh, you must be stressed. Oh, no. And then same with the, you know, talking and being able to speak. Rob has been relatively silent from talking to people outside of our specific bubble. And yesterday I had mentioned when he was in the car on the way to the thing, I said, well, you should put something out on, we've got a Facebook group. And I said, you should put something in there about how you're feeling as a support individual. And he ended up doing that on his personal page. And he's like, wow, a lot of people like really resonated with that. And I was like, yeah. And I mean, I don't think it's very often that the partners of those going through cancer treatment get the opportunity to share how they feel and have it be validated, because they're not the person who's experiencing it. And a lot of times they feel less than because of that, but they're having their own experience that's totally separate. Like his experience is totally separate, but intertwined with mine, right? So I've said more times than one, like I'm the medical minded person. It would be much easier for me if he was the person on the table and I could talk to the doctors, please. Right? So I think I've cried a total of twice about myself in regards to everything, and anything else has been related to my deep desire for making it easier for him, making it easier on my kids, making it easier on my family. So a lot of the things, like, again, all the things that you're saying, right? Like, yeah, like I live that. So, and yet now I take care of plants because I can't take care of people.
Your plants are, you've got
Amazing.
You've got a lot of plants.
I love them. They're gorgeous.
I'm actually going to give one away for this if anybody wants one. Stick out email. Yeah. So that was my gift.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Since I can't give away massage, I only have one massage therapist. So.
And Nina, would you like to wrap it up?
Yeah, sure. I will definitely do that. I was just making sure I was unmuted as I ramble on here. Oh, well, you guys are amazing. I feel honored to be in your company, and I thank you for your perspectives and, you know, promotion of breast health and breast cancer awareness and, you know, addressing that. Thank you for those who donated. Your donations will be, Haylie will be presenting them to the C95 Marathon for breast cancer, if that's the proper name. And so we thank you for that. We appreciate it. And, you know, thank you for your support tonight. It means the world to us. If you have any questions after the fact, feel free to get in touch with either Haylie, myself, or Becky. We'd love to answer any questions or help you in any way that we can. And with that, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you so much. You guys are